Imagine moving to a new school, carrying hopes of fresh beginnings, only to be greeted by whispers, cruel stares, and a wall of bullies determined to break you down. For one young cheerleader, this nightmare became her reality. What her tormentors didn't know, however, was that her father carried a past far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. A Navy SEAL trained in resilience, strategy, and justice. This isn't just a story about bullying. It's about courage, family, and the moment when the truth hits harder than any insult. Before we dive into this powerful story, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more gripping stories you won't forget. The Friday night lights glared over Westbrook High, casting the football field in gold and shadows. The crowd roared as the cheer squad leapt into formation, pom-poms sparkling under the sky. But not everyone was cheering. In the corner of the bleachers, a group of girls whispered, their eyes locked on the newcomer in the cheer lineup. Her name was Amara Johnson, a 16-year-old with braids tied neatly back, her skin glowing under the stadium lights. She moved with quiet confidence, her smile wide even when the crowd barely noticed her. For weeks, she had been the subject of stares, the hushed conversations in hallways, the snickers behind hands. She was different. And in Westbrook, different was dangerous. The cheer captain, Brittany Hale, blonde, rich, and ruthless, didn't like her from the moment Amara tried out. It wasn't just because Amara nailed every routine with flawless energy. It wasn't even because the coach praised her more than the seniors. It was because Amara dared to stand where Brittany thought no one else belonged. And so, the whispers grew louder. The accidents on the cheer mats became more frequent. Amara's gym bag went missing. Her sneakers were stuffed in the toilet once. Every day, she endured it with a tight-lipped smile. Every night, she went home pretending she was fine. But at home, the walls told a different story. Her father, Marcus Johnson, was a man of silence. He carried himself like someone who had seen storms most people couldn't imagine. His arms bore faded scars. His eyes, a sharp steel gray, watched every detail in the room. He wasn't the kind of father who asked too many questions. He was the kind who noticed the answers before you spoke. Neighbors thought he was just strict, the kind of man who woke up before dawn to run and expected his daughter to fold her bed sheets military tight. What they didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just strict. He wasn't just a veteran. Marcus Johnson was a Navy SEAL. And when the bullies of Westbrook High decided to push Amara too far, they were about to discover the hard way that some fathers don't call the principal, don't write angry emails, and don't sit quietly in the stands. Some fathers fight battles most people will never see. Some fathers don't need to raise their voice to change everything. And Amara's father? He was one of them. This was the story of how the cruel laughter of a few teenagers collided with the silent strength of a man trained for war, and how a daughter found her own voice in the shadow of that strength. They thought she was weak. They thought she was alone. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. When Amara Johnson first walked through the glass doors of Westbrook High School, the air shifted. Students glanced up from their lockers, their conversations pausing for just a moment before resuming with a new subject, the new girl. Amara adjusted the strap of her backpack, keeping her chin lifted the way her father always taught her. Walk in like you belong there. Even if they don't want you there, you claim your space, he had said the night before. His voice echoed in her mind now, steadying her against the whispers that darted across the hallway. Westbrook wasn't like her old school in San Diego. There, diversity was everywhere. Classrooms filled with kids from different backgrounds, accents mixing in the hallways, neighborhoods alive with culture. Here, in this small southern town, the differences stood out sharper, like black ink on white paper. And Amara's difference was not easily overlooked. She didn't let it show, though. She moved through the day with quiet determination, taking notes in math class, volunteering an answer in English when no one else dared, and offering a polite smile to anyone who made eye contact. Still, beneath the surface, she could feel the weight of stares pressing into her back. The one place she felt lighter was the gym. When she spotted the sign-up sheet for cheerleading tryouts, she didn't hesitate. Cheer had been her passion since she was 10 years old. Back in San Diego, she'd spent summers at camps, weekends at competitions. For her, cheerleading wasn't just pom-poms and chants. It was discipline, teamwork, and strength disguised as grace. Tryouts at Westbrook, however, were less about skill and more about politics. Brittany Hale and her squad of seniors practically ran the team like a royal court. They were all polished smiles and matching bows, the kind of girls whose mothers ran the PTA and whose fathers owned car dealerships. When Amara walked into the gym that day, all eyes snapped to her. She stretched calmly, ignoring the whispers. The coach called for routines, and one by one, the girls flipped, jumped, and shouted their way through. Then it was Amara's turn. She took the floor, her movements sharp, her energy flawless. Every flip landed perfectly, every motion crisp. Her voice carried, strong and confident. By the end, there was no denying she had outperformed half the room. The coach clapped enthusiastically. "That's the spirit we need. Great job, Amara." But on the sidelines, Brittany's smile faltered. She leaned toward her friend Madison and whispered, just loud enough for Amara to hear, "She's good, but not exactly Westbrook material." The others giggled. Amara felt the sting, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, thanked the coach, and walked back with her head high. By the following week, the roster was posted. Amara's name was there, right under Brittany's. She had made the team. From that moment, the atmosphere shifted. What should have been a celebration quickly became the start of a silent war. Locker doors, accidentally, slammed into her arm. Her water bottle was dumped out more than once. The squad's group chat forgot to include her. To the rest of the school, it seemed like harmless pranks, typical high school tension. But Amara knew better. There was venom behind their smiles, and Brittany was holding the vial. Still, she refused to back down. Each practice, she showed up early, ran extra drills, and nailed every move. If Brittany thought she could scare her off, she was wrong. At home, her father noticed the bruises on her arm, the forced smile when she said, "Practice was fine." But Marcus didn't push. Not yet. He just nodded, the steel in his eyes hardening as he filed the details away. He had lived his life understanding one thing: enemies reveal themselves long before they strike. And he was watching. For Amara, high school had become a battlefield she hadn't chosen. For Marcus, it was only a matter of time before he stepped onto it himself. It started small, almost playful. A missing notebook here, a whispered comment there. At first, Amara brushed it off. She had been the new girl before. She knew people tested boundaries. But at Westbrook High, the boundaries weren't just tested. They were shattered. The first real strike came on a Tuesday afternoon during cheer practice. The squad was rehearsing for the upcoming pep rally, and the coach had assigned Amara to the front row. Brittany didn't like that. Not one bit. As the music blared and the girls went into their routine, Brittany called out, "Lift her higher," during the stunt sequence. Amara was hoisted into the air, her body tight and balanced, ready to flip down into the cradle. But just as the beat dropped, one of the basses, Madison, loosened her grip. The other girl followed her lead. Amara felt her body tip forward, the gym ceiling spinning as the ground rushed toward her. Gasps echoed through the gym, but at the last second, she twisted her body and landed hard on her knees, her palms scraping against the mat. Pain burned across her skin, but she refused to cry out. The coach rushed over. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Amara said, standing quickly, even though her knees stung. Behind her, Brittany hid a smirk. "Sorry, coach. Guess we need more practice holding her. She's heavier than she looks." The girls around her laughed. Amara's stomach tightened, but she kept her face calm. She walked back into formation, ignoring the sting of laughter pricking at her ears. The next day, her sneakers disappeared before gym class. She found them later, stuffed into the toilet, dripping and ruined. When she walked into the locker room carrying the soggy shoes in a plastic bag, the cheer squad was there, pretending to scroll on their phones. The smell of chlorine and bleach filled the air. Brittany looked up, her eyes wide with fake innocence. "Oh my gosh, who would do something so gross?" she asked, hand over her mouth. Amara stared at her for a long moment. She wanted to scream, to throw the shoes in Brittany's face. But instead, she set them down calmly and said, "Guess I'll just buy another pair." Then she walked out, her back straight, her pride intact. But the worst came during lunch that Friday. The cafeteria buzzed with chatter, the clatter of trays and laughter bouncing off the walls. Amara carried her tray, searching for a place to sit. Before she could set it down, a loud voice rang out. "Hey, new girl!" It was Brittany, standing at her table, surrounded by the entire squad. "Why don't you show us that flip you almost messed up? You know, the one where you almost face-planted." The girls burst into laughter. Amara's hands tightened around the tray. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Not interested," she said flatly, turning away. But as she moved past, Madison stuck out her foot. Amara stumbled forward, the tray flipping out of her hands. Food splattered across the floor and across her shirt. The cafeteria erupted into laughter, the sound bouncing off the walls, cutting through her like knives. She froze for a moment, heat flooding her face. Every eye in the room was on her. Brittany pulled out her phone, snapping a picture with a wicked grin. "Smile for the yearbook," she sneered. Amara straightened, wiped the mashed potatoes off her shirt, and looked Brittany dead in the eye. For the first time, her voice didn't tremble. "You'll regret this." The laughter around her faltered for just a second, the sharpness in her tone catching them off guard. But Brittany quickly recovered, rolling her eyes. "Whatever, new girl." Amara left the cafeteria, her chest heaving, but she didn't let a tear fall. That night, when she got home, Marcus was waiting. He sat at the kitchen table, his coffee untouched, his gaze steady on her stained shirt. "Who did it?" His voice was low, calm, but it carried a weight that made Amara's breath hitch. "No one," she muttered, setting her bag down. Marcus leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "He didn't push. Not yet." But in that silence, Amara realized something. Her father already knew the truth. And if the bullies kept going, they weren't just going to answer to her. They were going to answer to him. The pep rally was supposed to be the highlight of the season. The gym buzzed with energy as the marching band pounded out drumbeats and the student body roared with school spirit. Banners hung from the rafters, blue and gold streamers swaying in the air. Teachers stood at the sidelines, clapping along. For Amara, it was her first big performance with the squad, her chance to show the entire school what she could do. She had rehearsed every move, every count, until her muscles burned and her voice was raw. This was the moment she had been waiting for. But for Brittany and her crew, it was the perfect opportunity. As the squad lined up backstage, Amara tightened her ponytail and adjusted her bow. She could feel the eyes on her, hundreds of them, waiting. She whispered a quiet mantra to herself, the one her father drilled into her every morning before practice. Calm is strength. Focus is power. The music blared, and the routine began. The girls flowed onto the court, jumping, flipping, and chanting in perfect rhythm. Amara matched them step for step, her energy electrifying. She could feel the crowd noticing her now, their cheers rising as she nailed every move. Then came the stunt sequence. Amara was the flyer, the centerpiece of the routine. The bases locked their hands, ready to launch her into the air. She sprinted, leapt, and soared upward, her body twisting gracefully in mid-air. The crowd gasped with awe. But in the split second before she was supposed to land, Brittany gave a signal. One of the bases shifted deliberately, throwing Amara off balance. She came crashing down. The thud echoed across the gym as her body hit the mat, pain shooting up her side. Gasps filled the air, then silence, followed by a ripple of laughter from the student section. The sound clawed at her, stabbing deeper than the ache in her ribs. Amara gritted her teeth, pushing herself up slowly. Her hands trembled, but she refused to let them see her break. On the sidelines, Coach rushed over, panic etched across her face. "Are you okay? Do we need the nurse?" "I'm fine," Amara whispered, though her body screamed otherwise. She forced herself to stand, her legs wobbling. Brittany smirked, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Sorry, guess we lost our grip." "You okay, Amara?" The squad chuckled behind their hands. The crowd wasn't sure whether to laugh or to clap. The humiliation was worse than the fall. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of walking off the mat in defeat, Amara turned back to her spot in formation. She raised her chin, her eyes blazing with quiet fire. "Start the music again," she told the coach. The coach hesitated. "Amara, you don't have to. I said start it again." Her voice was steady, commanding in a way that silenced even Brittany. The band restarted, and Amara pushed through the pain, performing every move sharper, louder, and stronger than before. By the time the routine ended, the gym erupted, not in laughter this time, but in wild applause. Students who had mocked her just minutes earlier were now on their feet, cheering. But Brittany stood at the back, her face frozen, her hands clenched at her sides. She hadn't expected Amara to rise. That night at home, Amara sat on the edge of her bed, her ribs aching, her body sore. Marcus entered the room quietly. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. He had seen the video circulating on social media, the one Brittany's friends had posted, hoping to humiliate her. But the video had backfired. It wasn't a clip of her falling that spread across town. It was the moment she stood back up, demanded the music restart, and finished with flawless defiance. Marcus sat beside her, his large hand resting on her shoulder. "Proud of you," he said simply. His voice carried weight, each word heavy with meaning. For the first time in weeks, Amara allowed herself to smile. But deep down, Marcus knew something she didn't. The bullies wouldn't stop. And the next time, they'd go further. And when they did, he'd be ready. The pep rally video spread faster than wildfire. By Monday morning, nearly every student at Westbrook High had seen Amara fall and rise again. For many, it changed how they looked at her. She wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was the one who took a hit and came back stronger. But not everyone was cheering. Brittany seethed. In her mind, Amara had stolen the spotlight. What was supposed to humiliate her had turned into a badge of honor. The whispers in the hallway weren't about Brittany's leadership anymore. They were about Amara's courage. And Brittany hated it. That week, the attacks became nastier. Someone stuffed Amara's locker with ketchup packets, drenching her books in sticky red mess. Her math notes disappeared the day before a test. Anonymous comments appeared under her Instagram photos. Go back where you came from. Cheer doesn't need you. Wannabe. Amara tried to brush it off, but her armor was cracking. She walked through the halls a little faster, kept her eyes down a little longer. At home, though, Marcus saw it all. He noticed the way her shoulders hunched, the quiet way she closed her bedroom door, the extra minutes she spent scrubbing her cheer uniform. Marcus had lived his life reading people. In the SEALs, it was the difference between life and death, knowing when a man was lying, when danger was close, when fear was hiding under a steady gaze. His daughter's silence spoke louder than words. One evening, Marcus found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a ruined textbook. Ketchup stains covered half the pages. "Locker?" he asked. Amara nodded, not meeting his eyes. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Do you know what bullies are trained to look for?" he asked. She shook her head. "Weakness," he said flatly. "They hunt for it. Test it. Push until you break." He leaned forward, his steel-gray eyes locked on hers. "But here's the truth they don't understand. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't always punch back. Sometimes, it just refuses to bend." Amara swallowed, blinking back tears. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin, heavy, bronze, its surface worn smooth. He slid it across the table. "That's a challenge coin," he said. "Given to me by my unit. We carry them everywhere, to remind us of who we are and what we stand for. You keep this. When you feel small, when you feel alone, you remember whose blood runs in your veins." Her fingers curled around the coin. It was warm, as if it carried years of battles inside it. For the first time, she saw her father not just as the man who made her fold laundry with military corners, but as someone who had faced enemies far worse than spoiled cheerleaders with cell phones. That night, Marcus went for his usual run before dawn. But instead of his normal route, he looped past the high school. He studied the shadows around the gym, the chain-link fence, the blind spots by the parking lot. His instincts weren't quiet anymore. They were screaming. He knew escalation when he saw it. The girls weren't going to stop at ketchup packets and shoes in toilets. They were pushing boundaries, seeing how far they could go. And when people push far enough, they eventually go too far. When Marcus returned home, sweat dripping down his back, he stopped at Amara's door. She was asleep, the coin still clutched in her hand. He stood there for a long moment, his jaw tight. If these girls thought they could break his daughter, they were about to learn a lesson he had spent a lifetime perfecting. You don't pick a fight with someone who has been trained for war. It was late on a Thursday evening when the line was finally crossed. Cheer practice had ended an hour ago, and the gym stood mostly empty. The faint echo of bouncing basketballs came from the boys' team on the other side of the school, but the locker room halls were quiet. Amara stayed behind to redo a routine, determined to prove herself. That's when Brittany and her crew cornered her. "Look who's still here," Brittany said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. Behind her, Madison and Kayla flanked the doorway, their phones already recording. Amara's stomach tightened. She knew what this was. "You embarrassed us at the pep rally," Brittany continued, stepping closer. "Do you think people actually like you now? Newsflash, they're laughing at you, not cheering for you." Amara tried to step around her, but Madison shoved her shoulder. "Don't walk away," Madison sneered. "We're not done." Kayla pulled something from her bag, a bottle of soda mixed with Mentos. She shook it violently, the fizz building inside. "This'll be good for TikTok," she laughed. Amara backed against the lockers, her fists clenched. "Leave me alone." But Brittany only leaned in closer, holding her phone up to capture every second. Smile for the camera, new girl. And that's when the voice came. Calm. Steady. Cold as steel. She said leave her alone. The girls froze. The air shifted. Heavy. Dangerous. Slowly, they turned. Marcus Johnson stood at the end of the hall, his frame filling the space. He hadn't raised his voice, but the weight of his words pressed down like stone. His gray eyes locked on Brittany, unblinking, calculated. Brittany tried to laugh. "Oh, hi, Mr. Johnson. We were just. Step away from my daughter." His tone left no room for argument. The soda bottle slipped from Kayla's hand, fizz spraying across the floor. Madison lowered her phone, suddenly pale. But Marcus didn't move closer. He didn't need to. Every inch of his posture radiated discipline, authority, and something the girls had never seen before, a man who knew exactly what fear was, and how to create it. "You think bullying makes you strong?" Marcus said, his voice low but cutting through the silence. "It doesn't. It makes you weak. Because real strength is knowing you could hurt someone and choosing not to." The hallway was silent, except for the fizzing bottle at their feet. Brittany's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no comeback. Marcus stepped forward slowly, his boots echoing against the tile. His presence was overwhelming, not because he shouted, but because he didn't have to. Every step carried the weight of battles fought in places these girls couldn't imagine. He stopped just feet away. His voice dropped even lower. "You will not touch my daughter again. You will not whisper her name. You will not so much as look at her without respect. Am I clear?" The girls nodded quickly, their faces pale. "I asked you a question," Marcus said. "Yes, sir," Brittany stammered, her voice shaking. Marcus studied her for a long moment, his silence more terrifying than words. Finally, he nodded toward the door. "Go." The three scrambled past him, nearly tripping over each other in their hurry to escape. When the hallway was empty, Amara let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Marcus turned to her. His face softened, though his eyes still carried fire. "You don't ever have to fight this alone," he said quietly. "Not while I'm here." Tears welled in her eyes, not of weakness, but of relief. She nodded, clutching the coin he had given her days before. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remember this. You stood tall long before I stepped in. That's what makes you strong." "Me? I'm just the shadow making sure no one forgets it." The next morning at Westbrook High, whispers spread like wildfire. No one knew exactly what had happened in the gym hallway the night before, but everyone had heard a version of the story. Brittany and her crew cornered Amara, and then her dad showed up. Some said he yelled. Others swore he looked like he could break a man in half with one hand. Whatever the truth was, one detail remained consistent. Brittany had run out of the gym pale and trembling, her phone abandoned on the floor. By lunchtime, Brittany and her friends were silent shadows at their usual table. No laughing, no taunts, no whispers. For the first time, their power seemed to evaporate. Amara walked into the cafeteria, her tray steady in her hands. Conversations hushed as students glanced at her, but this time there was no mockery in their eyes. Some even nodded at her, subtle signs of respect. She sat down, and for once, she wasn't alone. A girl from her history class slid into the seat across from her. Another from English soon joined. The tide had shifted. Later that week, the principal called Brittany, Madison, and Kayla into his office. There had been complaints, reports of bullying, and enough video evidence to make their defense crumble. Suspension notices were sent home. The queen bees had finally lost their crowns. For Amara, the real victory wasn't in their punishment, it was in her own transformation. She had walked through humiliation, isolation, and cruelty, but she hadn't broken. She had risen. At home, Marcus didn't celebrate with big speeches or high-fives. He simply watched her from across the dinner table, pride hidden behind his calm eyes. He had always believed in letting strength speak for itself. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the house filled with the soft hum of cicadas, Amara turned to him. "Dad." "Yeah." "Thank you for stepping in." Marcus leaned back, his arms crossed. "That's what I do." He paused, then added, "But don't forget, before I ever showed up, you already fought back. You stood up when they tried to tear you down. That's your strength, not mine." Amara smiled, the coin still tucked safely in her pocket. She finally believed it. From that day on, the name Amara Johnson meant something different at Westbrook High. Not the new girl, not the target, but the girl who wouldn't break. And as for Marcus, the legend of the Navy SEAL father lingered in the whispers of the school. The bullies never came near Amara again. They had learned a lesson they'd never forget. Some people fight with words. Some fight with fists. But the most dangerous kind of strength is the kind that doesn't need to fight at all. And so, Amara's story reminds us all, courage isn't about never falling, it's about rising, no matter who tries to push you down. And sometimes, the strongest battles are fought in silence, with shadows standing guard. What did you think of this story? Would you have stood tall like Amara did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, and subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal hidden strength when it's needed most.